Everyone, can you guys hear me okay? All right. So thank you so much for having me. Again, I am a human health researcher in the Department of Kinesiology, which is a really broad field that's really fell to society. And I tend to talk to other human health researchers. So I'm excited to talk to a group that has a primary interest in animal health. So for the sake of time, because we have a pretty short time together today, although my title is Dogs as Support and Motivation for Physical Activity and Health, I'm going to really focus on the physical activity part of that sentence and talk primarily about that. So the field of physical activity and health is really actually not that old. So in the 50s were the first studies that showed that moving around decreased your likelihood of having a heart attack. And these were occupational studies, actually. So workers that had more active jobs were less likely to have heart attacks. And now, after 50 or 60 years of research, this is still the most recognized health benefit of physical activity, and we know even more about it. It's very well documented that being active reduces your risk of lots of cardiovascular diseases, including stroke. But now we know so much more. So we know that physical activity reduces your risk of type 2 diabetes. For people with type 2 diabetes, it helps reduce progression of the disease. We know that physical activity is really critical for maintaining a healthy body weight, reducing the risk of excessive weight gain. We know that physical activity is super critical for brain health. So tons of researchers on both ends of the age spectrum in my field, so a lot with kids and focused on physical activity and academic achievement, even with kids with ADHD is one particular real area of interest, and then of course with older adults. And we know that physical activity is really important for reducing the risk of dementia, including Alzheimer's disease. Physical activity reduces the risk of depression, and for people with depression and anxiety, we know it reduces symptoms. We now know physical activity reduces the risk of 8 different types of cancer. So the research is strongest with breast and colon, but now we know lung cancer, endometrial, and 4 others. You have osteoarthritis. Physical activity is key for reducing pain and improving physical function and quality of life. And in older adults, we want to reduce fall risk. We need to be physically active. So it goes on and on. Physical activity is pretty much good for almost everything you can think of. So in order to achieve these widespread benefits, the National Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans recommend that adults shoot for 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity physical activity. So moderate intensity is just the equivalent of a brisk walk. If you want to be really efficient, you can do 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity, so that's going to be getting your heart rate up more, so more of a jog, some combination of the two, and we also want people doing 2 days a week of muscle strengthening activity. Okay? So that's the guidelines to get all those health benefits. So to researchers like me and people in public health, we feel like physical activity is really a best buy. Right? If you can limit your sitting and sleeping to 23.5 hours a day, you can reduce your risk of virtually every chronic condition. And we're not even talking about acute benefits of physical activity, like your ability, how it energizes you and helps you to focus. Right? But the latest national data shows that about half of American adults are not achieving the guidelines, and that less than a quarter are meeting the aerobic and muscle strengthening, So the half are not meeting that 150 minutes. And this is self-report data. So we know people tend to overestimate the amount that they're doing. When you put a monitor on people and measure how much they're getting, way fewer people are meeting guidelines, okay? So to me, this is a missed opportunity. So you could spin it either way, 1 in 2 people great or 1 in 2 people not so hot. To me, for 30 minutes a day of just moderate intensity walking, we got to get more people moving. So as you guys know, I'm trying to convince people that dogs make a whole lot of sense for this. So Jackie Epping, who is really a pioneer in the field of dog walking science, about how many years ago? This was 2011, published this paper that I thought made a really, really strong case for why it makes so much sense to kind of go after dog walking interventions. So I'm going to use Jackie's paper to guide the first part of my talk. So what Jackie said is that we need effective population-level strategies to promote physical activity that are 1, practical, 2, accessible, sustainable, and that can reach a large proportion of the population. And she really felt that dog walking may be such a strategy. So for the first part of my talk, I'm going to try to convince you of this. You might already be convinced, but I'm going to speak from sort of a behavioral medicine, exercise science perspective. Then I'm going to give you guys an overview of the state of the dog walking science, so what we know so far. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff out there, but what does the science really say and where are we? And then I want to talk to you a little bit about what I'm doing just up the road. It was a super short drive to UMass Amherst. I'm in my 3rd year as faculty, so I'm just getting my lab off the ground. So I've done a few pilot studies and curious to see what you guys think and maybe opportunities for collaboration. So part 1 is the convincing. okay? So about 48% of US households own a dog, which would equate to 60 million households. You guys probably know, depending on what statistics, this number is going to vary. So this is from the American Pet Products Association. If you go with AVMA, it's going to be slightly lower. But regardless of what stat you pull, between a third and a half of Americans have a dog in their house. Okay? So in terms of reach, Jackie's point about focusing on interventions that can reach a lot of people, dog ownership and dog walking hits that one, no problem. Dogs need to be walked, right? So dog walking serves a purpose. And we know when we try to promote physical activity that's actually sustainable, it's way more effective to target types of physical activity that serve a purpose beyond just long-term disease risk reduction. It just doesn't jive with how human beings make decisions. We really, from a behavioral economics perspective, we really value immediate gratification and immediate purpose versus something that's so distant, right? The couch is just too inviting. So dog walking serves a purpose, right? Whether you think of it as healthy for your dog, whether you don't want your dog to eat your house, whether your dog just needs to go to the bathroom, there's a purpose for taking your dog on a walk. And we know that that sense of obligation that a lot of owners feel to take their dog on a walk is a strong correlate. So people that really feel that obligation and that their dog provides support, more likely to walk. Another huge thing in my area in physical activity research is habit right now. So thinking that if we can get people to engage in physical activity habitually as part of their routine, they're going to be more likely to sustain it over time. So in order to form a habit, you need a cue, right? Like, best cue ever, right? So if you have a routine where you take your dog on a walk at the same time every day, the cue is going to be the dog being antsy, right, or staring at the door, or like my dog puts her head on my knee. The routine becomes walking the dog, and then the reward is a happy dog or a dog that doesn't eat your house, right? So again, this really fits with the way that physical activity research is shifting. We need to find activities that are purposeful and that people engage in habitually. The other thing is that dogs live a pretty long time. So with most physical activity interventions, you're talking 8 weeks, 12 weeks, some really good ones, maybe 6 months. Then the intervention ends, the cues are gone, and people tend to kind of regress back to where they were before the intervention. For dog walking, the cue stays, right? So for over a decade in a lot of situations. My dog is 14, and she's grayer than this. We also care a lot, right? So you guys know that Americans love their pets. So there's a couple different ways you can quantify this. And again, this is me usually speaking to exercise scientists. Most people, almost everybody, considers the dog a part of a family. Other ways to look at this is how much money we spend on our pets, right? We care a whole lot. We spend $72 billion a year. Some more somber examples, but I think really powerful examples, are when you think of Hurricane Katrina and how many people lost their lives because they would not leave their pets behind, right? People literally will die for their pets. They care so much about the bond and about them. Same goes for victims of domestic violence that won't leave because they're worried about their pets, right? So we know that when you're trying to promote physical activity, you have to tap into things people actually care about. You can't just tell people if you don't want to get heart disease, you should walk 30 minutes a day. It just doesn't resonate. So I really feel like dog walking is such a good fit for so many people because people care so much about their dogs. So in that real quick spiel, I hope I've convinced you that dog walking is practical, serves a purpose, right? Accessible in the sense that walking isn't an activity that requires a lot of skill or practice. Able-bodied people, for the most part, are able to walk. Sustainable in the sense that it lends itself well to habit formation, and it's something we deeply care about. And then reach in terms of just the vast number of people in this country that already have a dog in their home. So I hope that I hit all these things. I was supposed to click the check marks as I said those things. So that's why I really feel that dog walking is a good, promising direction to go. All right, that's my spiel for why. Now I want to talk to you about what we know so far, so the state of the science. So where people started was the basic question, are dog owners more active than non-dog owners? Let's just answer that first. So for the most part, yes. So the biggest, most comprehensive review on this topic was published in 2013 and found that for the most part, dog owners engage in more walking and more physical activity than non-dog owners. Important to note, though, that we can't establish causality here, right? It's just cross-sectional. So we don't know if the dogs are making the owners more active or if more active people decide to become dog owners. So it's just a cross-sectional snapshot. Only 2 studies actually looked to see if walking and physical activity increased with the acquisition of a dog. So we just have to so it's a promising first step, but we have to be careful about what conclusions we draw here. I also want to point out that 4 of the 14 studies included in the review used objective measures of physical activity. So in my field, objective measures are all the rage. So if it just has self-report, we're worried about the biases that come with that, of people over-reporting or forgetting what the, it's not always that people are lying. Sometimes that's the case with dog walking, right? People feel like there's a social desirability bias, and so they'll report they walk more. But people are just bad at remembering what they do. So we always like to use mixed methods to have both a report to provide context, but also have objective measures. So the one on your left here, the actigraph accelerometer, is probably the most common that's used in the field. And this lets you get at total volume of physical activity as well as intensity. So people tend to wear it on the hip. You can also wear it on your wrist. But if you care about walking, hip is better. Your classic pedometer, right, that just measures steps, you're not going to get at intensity, but you can get total volume of physical activity. And then this guy on the right, the Active Pal, is the priciest of the bunch, but is really good for measuring sedentary behavior. So there's a big shift in my field right now to study how much we sit, in addition to how much exercise we're getting. So this phenomenon of the exercise and couch potato, so even people that go out and get their 30 minutes in the morning, if you sit the entire rest of the day, that still may have negative health consequences. So the Active Pal, because it's literally stuck to the top of your thigh, unless your femur is snapped, right? You're either sitting or you're standing. So it's like 99% accurate in telling us whether people are up or down. And it's also good for steps. Okay, so we really want to see more dog walking research use objective measures. That'll help with the rigor. So I want to point out one really good study that wasn't included in that review because it's more recent, and I think it's a great one. So a group controlled for lots of confounding variables by pairing, carefully matching a group of dog owners and non-dog owners, and had them wear that Active Pal device. And they collected data for 1 week across 3 different seasons, right, being conscious of the fact that dog walking is super sensitive to weather. So they looked at how much time people spent walking, how much time they spent walking at a moderate intensity, right? So we really want to be at that moderate intensity to achieve health benefits, and then how much people were sitting. And it's really promising to see that a study with really rigorous methods had really strong, significant outcomes. So the dog owners in this study achieved 22 additional minutes per day of walking, which is really huge in my field, and accumulated almost 3,000 extra steps per day. So if I design a physical activity intervention and I get an increase in 2,000 steps per day, I'm super happy. That's a great goal to shoot for. People also sat a little bit less, fewer sitting events, so 30-minute bouts of sitting. But that evidence wasn't as spectacular. Okay, so we've established generally that dog owners seem to be more active than non-dog owners, right? And you're kind of assuming there that dog owners are walking their dog. Assuming, right? So the next question is, are dog owners who walk the dog more likely to meet those physical activity guidelines than those that don't walk the dog? So let's talk specifically about walking, not just ownership. So for this one, an even more recent review looked at the odds of meeting the guidelines through dog walking. And they found that about 37% of dog owners that do not walk the dog met the guidelines, compared to over 60% of dog owners that do walk met the guidelines. So again, we're assuming it's the dog walking, but at least this is a little stronger than just looking at dog ownership. So they concluded that dog owners that walk the dog are 2.5 times more likely to meet those aerobic physical activity guidelines than owners that don't walk the dog. So right, you're sort of inferring here that dog walking is a good way to meet the guidelines. So your next question might be, how many people are in that non-dog walking category? Like, what's our window for intervention here? So overall, across all the studies included in this review, 36% of dog owners were not walking their dog, okay? So about a third. So this included studies across in different countries. I pulled the US studies, right? Because I'm thinking pet culture is going to be different in different parts of the world. But it's kind of the same. So a sample from Michigan, 39% didn't walk. San Diego, 31% didn't. Here's one that's a little bit lower. The one at the bottom is kind of wild, right? So older adult dog owners in 2 cities, 64% were not walking the dog. Okay, so these vary pretty dramatically. And the thing that really drives me crazy is that we don't have a standard definition by any means of dog walker. So depending on the study, right, one of the studies said if people reported at least a minute, they were in the dog walking category. Whereas that Thorpe one, the older adult one, that bar was way higher. People had to walk at least 3 times a week. And the bottom one, all you had to do was say, I walk the dog, and you were considered a dog walker, right? So do you see the problem here with inferring that because someone says they're a dog walker, that's why they're meeting the guidelines? They could be walking for 10 minutes a week, right? So we need to tighten this up in the field. Okay, how about correlates of dog walking? So what do we know about factors that influence whether or not someone's going to be in that dog walking category or that non-dog walking category? So Carrie Westgarth, who's is a big name in our field, she did a review on this topic, and she came at it from a social ecological perspective. So recognizing that factors at various levels are going to affect whether or not someone walks their dog, right? So the most internal level people always ask me about is size of the dog, energy level of the dog, age of the dog. You also have to wonder about the age of the person, right? The weight status of the person, that relationship between the owner and the dog. And then you got to bubble out, right? Because the environment's going to affect whether or not someone walks. If their environment's not safe, if there's no place, there's no walking trails, things like that. So that's what this paper was focused on. And I'm just going to pull out the main consistent take-homes. So one of the most consistent correlates of dog walking behavior, and I think I alluded to this before, was that sense of obligation to walk the dog and a perception that the dog provides social support for walking. So people that really felt like their dog wanted to go and felt committed and that they really should, they're the ones that were more likely to walk. So opportunity to intervene and really strengthen that relationship. Another consistent correlate was accessibility and proximity to walking areas. So you might have a strong bond with your dog, but if there's no place nearby that you can safely walk, it could be a problem. And then two other correlates that are not necessarily intervenable, but important. People with higher income more likely to walk their dogs, and people with overweight and obesity less likely to be walking their dogs. So in terms of describing dog walkers and non-dog walkers. Okay. So summary so far. We know that dog owners are more active than non-dog owners. We know that owners that walk their dog are more likely to meet physical activity guidelines than owners that don't walk their dog. I feel that methodologies are inconsistent and weak at this point, unfortunately. And we know that plausible intervention targets based on that last study, that correlate study, we might want to target that dog-owner relationship, try to get more people feeling that sense of obligation to walk, and we might need to do some environmental interventions so that people have places to walk that are aesthetically pleasing and safe. So talking about interventions, what's out there? What have we tried, how much? So to my knowledge, there are 8 studies that have tried to intervene to increase dog walking, which in the world of physical activity research is not very many. Okay? So I'm going to highlight just 3 to give you an idea of the different approaches that people have taken. So probably the most well-known is the PPET study. This is over 10 years old already. And this one specifically went over people with overweight and obesity that also had a dog that was overweight or obese. So it's really trying to leverage that bond and try to get healthy together. So they had the non-dog owners were just in a standard weight loss program, 12-week program with a maintenance phase, whereas the dog owners, they really tried to leverage this bond and focus on getting healthy together. The findings of this study were that both groups worked. We tend to shoot for 5% body weight loss to say it's clinically significant and your health risk improves. So both groups are right around there. They both lost weight. They both increased their physical activity. But I think it's important to note that if we followed these people longer, I would think that the people that are more active with their dogs might be more likely to sustain this for the reasons that we talked about earlier in the presentation. The fact that it's a meaningful, purposeful, potentially habitual form of physical activity. So you don't really know what to make of this, right, when the control group and the intervention group turn out the same. But perhaps long-term differences if we had measured it. So that was one example of sort of targeting both human and pet health. Ryan Rhoads, who's an absolute giant in our field, he came at it just from the dog health perspective. Did a really simple study where they randomized 58 inactive dog owners to either intervention or standard control, with the intervention just being materials detailing the benefits of exercise for your dog. So I think with the logic being that if people just know how important it is and know what they're supposed to do, you might increase that sense of obligation and get people moving more. Another one where both groups improved. So to me this says people are signing up for a dog walking intervention because they're ready to start walking their dog more. right? The intervention did increase a little bit more, but again, when people show up to an intervention, they already have an intention. So, N of 58, one thing I want you guys to notice, the trends, is that these are all pretty small. Everything done in this field so far has been pretty much pilot work. And even a more recent study, Libby Richards at Purdue, did a 3-month social cognitive theory, which is the big one in our field, email-based intervention. So again, really hands-off, just sending people emails about the benefits of dog walking and strategies for increasing dog walking, and they had pretty good success. I'm actually really amazed that just an email, right, so they were sending emails twice a week for the first 4 weeks of the study, and then just once a week for weeks 5 through 8, that they had increases in dog walking out to a year with people that were in the treatment group, so that dotted line there. So that's just a couple examples of what's been done in the field. Again, this one had 49 dog owners, the last had 50-something, so everything's small at this point. So this is a figure I put together just to show you that this field is really growing. We're generating more interest. So I basically just looked for dog walking studies in PubMed, which is the big database that exercise scientists use. And so all the bars are the number of articles on dog walking published per year that were indexed in PubMed. So you can see that ever since 2006, there's been papers on this published every year. And so that line just shows the number of dog walking studies that are indexed in PubMed as of 2018. So we're going up, up, up. So I just improved or expect that methodologies are going to get stronger, studies are going to get bigger, we're going to use more objective measures. So I feel like the future is bright for dog walking research, especially if we collaborate between animal health and human health researchers. So let's see, how am I doing on time? Pretty good. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what I'm doing at UMass. Again, I'm in my 3rd year, so I'm just getting my lab off the ground. So I want to talk to you about 2 pilot studies I've done, the SPOT study and the Buddy study, which just wrapped up this January. So if this will work, I'll show you. I am part of the UMass School of Public Health and Health Sciences, and they did a really sweet little feature on the SPOT study. So I'm thinking this is going to work, so for just 2 minutes, we'll watch the video.
Dog obedience training is not traditionally touted as a health intervention. I really view it as potentially a public health intervention because there's millions and millions of dog owners, and if by going to basic obedience training they're more strongly bonded with their pet and they get more mental health benefits and physical benefits from having a pet, then I do think it can be considered a public health intervention. In the study, the humans wear a research-grade accelerometer on their right hip, and the dogs wear a commercial-grade accelerometer called a FitBar. The motivation for doing it was to look and see if we can increase physical activity among participants that go through SPOT obedience training. Is it because they're actually becoming more active with their dog? When a person writes down that they're going for a walk with their dog, are they actually getting moderate intensity physical activity in concert with their dog? So we're kind of analyzing the data side by side, looking at the dog's activity in relation to the human's activity, and wondering if sort of they go up and down together. So the students helped me screen applications, invite participants to campus if they were preliminarily eligible. They helped me run these orientations where we basically told incoming participants all the requirements for the study and had them sign an informed consent. They helped me collect physical measures, so height, weight, and blood pressure we get at baseline, and then we get blood pressure and weight again at 6 and 12 weeks. I have 6 honors college students working with me this fall. They're all going to be looking at some aspect of the SPOT study data or other data from the lab for their thesis project. It's kind of a two-way street. They're helping me, but they're also getting experience with how to design and implement a behavioral health intervention. We're really not focusing on health at all. We're focusing on strengthening the bond, learning to better communicate with your pet, and improving your pet's behavior. We know there's a lot of people that own pets, in particular that own dogs, and we know a lot of people aren't walking them. So I was just trying to find a creative way to increase physical activity by getting away from promoting health. I just want to make it more the social norm, if in fact we're finding that it is leading to health benefits if you just take 6-12 weeks to train your pet.
Okay. Okay, so that was our little SPOT video. So SPOT stands for Stealth Pet Obedience Training Study. Hi, Carol Rose, I think you're watching. So this is Carol Rose Posture of My Dog LLC in Amherst, who was the trainer for the study. But the logic here, so stealth health really is just an approach that really de-emphasizes health to focus on things people care about and get them active as a side effect. So all I did was randomize 41 individuals that were owned dogs but weren't regularly walking or exercising to either basic obedience training or a weightless control. So again, the logic was to try to strengthen the dog-owner bond, which is one of the reasons that people promote obedience training, learn to better communicate, bond. So I'm thinking if you're more strongly bonded, you might have that greater sense of obligation to walk, and your dog might be better trained, so you may be more likely to walk. The other cool thing about stealth is that when you advertise a physical activity intervention, only certain type of people show up, right? So if you recruit for a dog obedience training, free dog obedience training, you get people that have no interest in physical activity, but they're in the door, and it's really hard to reach those people with traditional approaches. So that's why I'm sort of in love with stealth health. So we measured physical activity with these accelerometers at baseline 6 and 12 weeks. As you may have heard in the video, we also had accelerometers on the dogs. We had the FitBark on their collar. So I haven't analyzed the FitBark data yet. I totally should have before I came here. Coming soon, if anybody wants to help with it. But here's basically what we found, just quick snapshot, because I want to get to buddy study. But at baseline, people were getting about 5,000 steps a week, which is close to the sedentary mark in our field. At 6 weeks, the intervention group, which is the darker bar, on average saw a slight increase, where the control group saw a slight decrease. Note, we were running into winter here. So any increase or even maintenance is good for the most part, right? We know people's physical activity dips with winter. And then at 12 weeks, those differences, we didn't really have a maintenance of an increase in steps, but again, the control group is kind of going down. So for a pilot study, I feel like this is somewhat promising. Interesting stuff on the right side of your screen too in sedentary behavior. So I'm starting to think that even if people don't walk their dogs, dogs may be really good for breaking up sedentary time. So even if you're not going out for that purposeful walk, if you're getting up and down all the time, researchers in physical activity and health are really interested in whether that also has important health benefits. So dog-based interventions might be sort of a double whammy, trying to get people to walk more, but also to just get up from the couch more. Okay, so this is something, the sedentary behavior results. So again, you see the control group is going up, where the intervention group is sort of maintaining. So this is definitely something I want to explore in a larger trial. Okay, then the buddy study. This one is my baby. So this is a project that I sort of came up with as a postdoc, and it took so long, you guys will see logistically, to get off the ground. But we did it. So basically, buddy study was a single-arm feasibility study, so there was no control group, where participants fostered a shelter dog for 6 weeks. And at the end of the 6 weeks, they had the option to adopt the dog. Nobody would have participated if I didn't have that option. We measured physical activity and psychosocial well-being before they were fostering, at 6 weeks, and again at 12 weeks. So my primary purpose for the buddy study is to get at this causality question that I raised earlier in the talk. So do dogs make people more active, or are more active people more likely to get dogs? So you guys can probably imagine that randomizing dog ownership is not ethical. You can't just say you're going to be a dog owner and you're not. But you possibly can say you're going to foster a dog now and you're going to wait to foster. So my idea was, can we use fostering as a proxy for ownership? And if people actually go on to adopt the dog, then they essentially did it. You kind of did assign ownership, right? And you can follow them over time. So I wanted to just pilot whether or not I could actually get people to do this. Could I get the physical activity measurements? And if so, then we could actually do a randomized trial, where you could randomize people to foster now or foster later, and get at whether or not bringing a dog into your home is what leads to an increase in physical activity, okay? And why is this so important? It's important to me from just a basic scientific causality perspective, but I also think that we need more rigorous evidence showing that the dog really causes it if we want to design policies and programs that support dog ownership. So if we have really rigorous evidence that dogs cause improvements in health, you have a really strong case for trying to get rid of some rental restrictions, trying to pour money into programs that help low-income owners keep their pets in their home, right? So right now, in terms of public health, you need strong evidence. You can't just have cross-sectional studies with self-reported measures. So if you can prove causation, then I feel like we can talk about this stuff, and we can help more people have dogs if dogs really improve health. You guys might be familiar with some of these programs, which are super awesome. Okay, my secondary purpose, right? So first, I just want to get at the causality question, but I'm also thinking organizations all over the country need foster volunteers, right? So if we show that fostering improves your health, increases your physical activity, improves your mood, then maybe we can make a case for trying to study fostering as a public health intervention, as a stealth health intervention for people that love dogs and don't care about physical activity. Okay, so again, trying to reach people that are hard to reach with traditional health interventions. So that was sort of like not the main purpose, but where my head's at. So I was not going to be powered to see this, but this is what I would expect if dogs cause an increase in physical activity, is that everybody's low at baseline. I recruited inactive people. They would go up at 6 weeks because everybody's got a foster dog in their home. And then people that adopt, if the dog is causing it, should stay up, right? Whereas at the people that transfer the dog to another home, you would expect to go back down if it's really the dog that's driving the increase in physical activity. So I knew I wasn't powered to see this, but again, in a large-scale study, this is what I would think I'd see. So I partnered with Boston-based Last Hope Canine Rescue. They're amazing, all volunteer, all foster organization. All the pups come up from the south, which is so typical, right in New England. We advertised again as foster a rescue dog. It was not, we want to study if dogs make you more active. We didn't really, they knew they had a monitor, but it was not promoted. There was no foster a dog and walk your dog every day. It was just what happens when you take a dog into your home, for better or worse. So I'm going to keep moving quickly here, but I wanted to point out, I was trying to get 20 people. We had almost 1,400 people access our survey, right? So people in Western Mass were all about this. But only 143 completed it because it was all the dog owners, and I needed non-dog owners, right? So I purposely put the first line in bold, like, if you're a dog owner, you can't participate. So just, again, to keep it clean, right? We need a non-dog home to become a dog home. So I ended up inviting 28 people for orientation. Eventually, 18 showed up and signed the consent form. Whole thing, we had to do the home visits, we had to call the references, because Last Hope Canine's based in Boston and I'm in Western Mass. This was me going to everyone's house. It was fine, it was great. And then once people were approved to foster, right, I partnered with a great organization that was really hardcore in a good way about making sure that these dogs went to safe homes. Then they got matched with their pup through this crazy Facebook system where you had to basically like put the dog's name that you knew was coming up from Arkansas that you wanted to foster. It was first come, first serve. It was crazy. Everybody wanted the same dog, so there was some tension there. And then the really incredible thing, right, the dogs come up, they need to go to quarantine. It's Massachusetts state law. So I told participants, if you're in this study, you need to go get your dog in quarantine. And I said, if people need help, I'll help. Everybody did it. They were all about it. They couldn't wait to go get their foster dog. It's up in New Hampshire, so it was an hour and a half or more for everybody, one way. So when the dog came, they had to go get the pup and bring them home. Again, I'm a little bit short on time here, but I think I'm going to get to the results here. We ended up having 11 people that fostered dogs in this study, all women. And I will note that we had really good compliance. So once people committed, they did baseline, they did 6 weeks, they did 12 weeks. We have great data. And here's what we saw. So in terms of changes in physical activity, some people had huge ones and some people had none. So if you look at participant, these are individual changes. So 0 would be no change in steps with fostering. So participant number 8, 9, 10, 11, huge increases. Right? Remember, if we get 2,000 a day, super successful. We had 2 people over 4,000 a day, an increase. And then if you look at sedentary behavior, even more consistent. So even people that weren't necessarily getting more steps seem to be sitting less. Okay? And the psychosocial stuff I think is really neat too. So this is basically, it's presented a little bit differently. The blue is baseline, so pre-pup, and 6 weeks is having the dog in your home. Take home, this did stress some people out. Fostering a dog is stressful. But for the most part, people saw improvements in mood. Okay, so another promising thing to go after. All 11 dogs were adopted, right? So 8 of 11 were adopted by their buddy study foster. So from a scientific perspective, this means that when I blow this study up and do it again, I can follow people over time, right? If they agree to it, of course. All right, so conclusions and future directions. I can talk to you guys in the questions about my personal future directions, but in terms of this field, I hope that I made the case that dog walking is practical, accessible, sustainable, and can reach a lot of people, that we really need to improve the rigor of the dog walking science, but we're going that direction. We really need these prospective studies that follow new adopters over time to make sure that dogs are actually causing increases in physical activity, and we need strong measures. And dogs are the coolest, right? So thank you. Obviously, I'm early in my career, so students have helped a lot and run these initial pilot studies. Carol Rhoads was my dog trainer for the SPOT study, and Last Hope Canine Rescue Buddy study would not happen without them. That's it. So thank you so much for listening, and I'd love to take questions. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so the question is whether dog walking is as prevalent or non-prevalent, however you want to look at it, in other countries. So the bulk of the research is the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia. And I would say it's all about the same. It's all wishy-washy in how we define dog walking. So it all seems to hover somewhere between 30% and 60%. So there's no like people in this country are walking like crazy that I'm aware of. So yeah, good question. And the social support piece for sure. That's classic social cognitive theory that social support is so key, human social support, to whether or not people engage in physical activity. So double whammy if you have the dog and a friend. Other questions or comments? Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, what's going on with the sedentary results in the buddy study, essentially. So we didn't ask what they're doing. I do think playing or just getting up to let the dog out. So even if people weren't going for long walks, people still, with fostering, right, they never can let the dog off a leash. So even if it's just going out in the backyard, they still have to go out there with them. So I think that's what's going on, and the same with the SPOT study. So even if it didn't make people walk, you're practicing the skills you learn in class. You're supposed to be practicing your obedience training stuff. So I would think even that is going to help people move around more. But these were both unexpected. I was focused on physical activity and then found this interesting sedentary stuff. So I want to continue to explore that. Good question. So the science says, for the most part, it doesn't. Oh, I'm sorry. So does the size of the dog matter? And I would think, my hunch is that energy level matters more than size. So the science says it's kind of mixed. But I always look at that. I always ask, we always get the doggy demographics, right, which are super fun. So I always ask about energy level, size, breed, and age. I just haven't had a big enough study yet to really control for that. But I'm interested in not only whether people with larger dogs or more high-energy dogs walk more, and also whether they're more likely to meet that moderate intensity mark. So with a little dog, even if people are taking the dog out, if they're not walking fast enough to achieve health benefits, our field is shifting to appreciate even that lighter intensity stuff, any movement. But right now, the state of the science really says you have to get to that moderate intensity. So we want to make sure that people can achieve that with all-sized dogs. So, yeah. Yeah, so that comment basically was suggesting that the size of the dog might be indicative, like people might get a certain size dog or a certain energy level dog because they don't want to walk it perhaps, like a lower energy dog. But I also think your first point about like you have a small dog and you hike all the time, I think that people can achieve moderate intensity and that all dogs of all sizes need to be walked. So I think it is a common misconception that people think little dogs don't need to be walked or that they can't do more higher intensity things. So I think most people assume larger dog or at least medium-sized dog, but again, the science doesn't support that necessarily. So, yeah. Yeah, so do I plan to sort of collaborate and do studies, so in terms of looking at dog health also? Yes, I think that would be amazing. So right now, I have FitBark data, so physical activity on the dogs in 2 of my studies. But I have like self-reported, what owners report the dog's weight status to be, but I don't have like the actual body conditioning from like a vet. So I think it would be amazing, but I have human health expertise and I need the animal health experts to work with me to make sure I'm doing the right measures. Even dog stress, right? So the whole idea behind needing foster homes rather than having dogs in shelters, if we could show that the dogs are really benefiting in terms of their mental health, that would be awesome too. Yeah. We okay on time? Yeah. 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 Yeah, so the question was for Buddy Study, did we have monitors? And yes, I always use objective monitors, but right, they don't tell you what the person's doing, so you always have to pair it with a log booklet of some sort. So we have that. So what I showed you was just physical activity, not like reported dog walking. In future studies, scaling up, so qualitative. So I had Buddy Study participants for now, just open-ended, best thing, most challenging thing, how this affect your quality of life, and it's so amazing to read. And I should have put some quotes in there, that people just had such a positive experience. Some people reported this sort of bittersweet, totally stressed me out, but I love this dog so much, right? But yes, I think that would be really neat, and I think that the qualitative data could really provide like rich insight into what's really going on. So I think that's a good point and totally doable. Yeah. Good questions. Any last burning ones? Yeah. I don't know. That's why I need you guys. So cortisol, I would assume maybe, or like I read one paper where these monitors that I'm using to show I want physical activity to go up is that when dogs are really stressed out in a kennel, if they're moving around a lot, seeing a decrease maybe means that they've calmed. I'm not sure. That is so not my area. So that's where I would love to partner with people that study stress in dogs. So if anyone has ideas.